That's what I'm talking about. Welcome to the Show Up Podcast. My name is Calvin Nowell, and my whole life I've been working to show up.
You have great potential.
Show up for my friendships, show up for my family, show up for my health, and show up for my future. Showing up means looking at what's happening in life and navigating through what I can do to make it better.
Keep your focus.
Make it better. Make it more meaningful and make a difference, not only for me, but for everyone around me.
The people who really care for you are rooting for your rise.
I'm still a work in progress. Now let's show up.
Hey everyone, this is Calvin Nowell, and thank you for tuning in to the Show Up Podcast. And today, everybody, I am in my studio with my friend, speaker, singer, author, worship leader, Miss Nikki Lerner from Baltimore, Maryland. Welcome.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here.
It's so good to have you here. I am really, really excited. And today, we will be talking about awareness for diversity. And it is a huge topic for me. It's something that I've been in the struggle for a long time. Living here in Nashville, I feel like the environment is not as diverse as I would like it. And I'm particularly surrounded by Caucasians in where I live, where I go to church. And just through the years, when I moved here, I really felt like I wanted to graduate from being in all black churches and just be open to diversity. And it has truly impacted my life. And so through the years, I've been trying to learn more and more about how do we become a solution for diversity. And I was introduced to Nikki from our mutual friend, Eric Lige. Mm-hmm. And he said, you need to meet this girl, Nikki Lerner. And I was like, who is that? He's like, man, she just knows this diversity thing. She knows it really well. And so I reached out and I went to Baltimore to see her church. When I walked into your church, it was unbelievable. They had every race, every background, white, black, Latina, mm-hmm. Hispanic, everything. You just name it. It was colorful. Mm-hmm. And it was diverse with the ages and the age groups. There were handicaps in the choir. Mm-hmm. One lady had a dog on the stage, a dog.
Service dog.
A service dog was in the worship team.
We are the only choir that has a dog in the choir.
The only team that had a dog in the choir.
Right.
And so I was just sitting there like, okay, this is real. Like I'm seeing it in action. And so I reached out, developed a relationship with her. Fast forward, I did my own conference called Aware and brought Nikki in to help be a part of it and to help lead some of the discussions. And guys, listen, when Nikki opens her mouth and just starts talking about diversity, for all of my friends and family and all the people that listen and watch, I follow this woman. This is the person who really kind of coaches me and trains me, whether you know it or not. You're really that person. And so I'm just glad that you're here. And I really would love for you to just tell me how you got into this whole movement about diversity and awareness for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all that, by the way. I appreciate it. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
I will say this, that I've started to realize that there was sort of a divine setup in my life by God. I like to tell people that I was actually part of a bicultural family, even though we were all African American. So there was my mom's side of the family, which was very diverse, very multicultural. We had all kinds of people in our home and places we would go. And then there was my other side of the family, my stepfather's side of the family, that was just a different African American culture from my mom's. And so I had these kind of dueling sounds bad, but these two cultures in my house. When I was growing up, I had my own instances with race and race issues. And ironically enough, both from people who were non-African American, but a lot of it too from people who were African American. So as I was growing up, I just sort of wondered where I fit
Right.
in so many areas. And fast forward to what I'm doing now, it wasn't until we started going to our local church when my husband and I were in an interracial marriage. When we finally found a church for the first time where people didn't stare at us when we walked in the door.
Yeah.
And to find out that the church we started going to was so intentional
Right.
about diversity, about bringing people together, that I realized that something I had been living my whole life.
Right.
Now God was able to show me tangibly how to grab some language around how to describe what I had been experiencing.
So you were looking for a church that was diverse. Like, I have a good example. This weekend, I was in Utah. Now, for those that are listening and watching, Utah, what you can almost fill in the blank on what you think diversity looks like in Utah. And it leans predominantly Caucasian. So a friend or somebody, a mutual person that I know, an acquaintance, invited me to go to church on Sunday. And I was just like, okay. Like, this should be interesting because I'm in Utah. Well, I walked in and there was so much diversity. It blew my mind. It really blew my mind. Yeah. And I thought of you this weekend because you know what I saw? I saw a lot of interracial couples.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it made me think of you because what is going through an interracial couple's mind as they're coming into a church that's diverse? You're probably what?
Yeah, well, I can tell you just from our experience was, well, I wasn't necessarily looking for a diverse church because I never knew they existed. I mean, that's kind of the crazy part of it, is that I didn't grow up in church. I got saved when I was 13. I was the first Christian in my home. And so up until that point, when I started going to churches, I had never seen an integrated church.
Wow.
Everything I ever saw was racially segregated.
Okay.
So I didn't even know what I needed because I didn't even know it was out there.
Yeah.
So when we got to this church, as an interracial couple, some of the things you start to think about is can I show up at this church and have people not stare at me and stare at my family? B, if we were to have children and, people like us, we like to call them little peanut butter, butterscotch, caramel children, right? If our children are in a church and they go to Sunday school, do they have to spend that hour and a half every Sunday learning about Jesus, learning about salvation through Christ? Or do they have to spend all of that time in their Sunday school answering the question, what are you? So that was something we had to think about.
Yeah.
So really, when we walked into a diverse church and felt like we were home, it was like, I didn't care about the mission program.
Right.
I didn't care about what we were doing in the community. At first blush, I didn't care about any of those things. It was literally, am I safe here?
Yeah.
And do I have to check my culture at the door? Or does my husband have to check his culture at the door? Because usually, depending on where we are, somebody's got to give up something.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That's, when you told me that, I was thinking of you this weekend. I was like, that couple right there. I said, look at that. It's a black girl. She's holding this white man's hand and it's cool. And I kept seeing multiple couples that were diverse. And I was like, I bet you it's the same thing that Nikki has been saying. You were just looking for an on-ramp of people that look like you.
Absolutely. And
that represented you. And, what I love about that is there's a lot of intentionality. And what I think is missing is intentionality in the church and in organizations as a whole. Explain what being intentional means.
Absolutely. Well, in our training, a lot of the times, I like to tell people that you usually don't trip and fall into multicultural organizations,
right,
or churches.
Yeah.
You may trip and fall into a multicolored environment,
right,
which is different than multicultural. So multicolored is sort of like, we have an organization, we have a church that has lots of different kinds of people in it, right? Different colors, different flavors, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But there is still one majority culture, whether that be ethnic or gender, whatever it is, that is sort of calling the shots, making all the decisions, and setting the tone for the direction.
Yeah.
That would kind of be a multicolored church. That would sort of be, if you had an African-American church, right, that had one white family in it.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
we might say,
we're
multicultural.
multicolored.
Well,
like,
maybe
nah,
not.
This
It
gospel.
might be, It might be multicultural. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, multicolored. But I'm not sure yet you're multicultural.
Because culture is like a way of life, right? It's a way
Absolutely.
that you do things.
Absolutely. And culture needs to assert itself and express itself. And so when you get over to multicultural, that's when the people in your church or your organization can start to adjust the thermostat.
Right.
They can start showing up and opening up the fridge and getting their own drink and, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because now they feel like
They're at home.
They're at home and they have a sense of shared ownership with one another.
Why do you think that it's so segregated at churches on Sunday? Why do you think it's so, like, to have a diverse church? I mean, there are a lot of churches that are diverse, but there's way more people that aren't. And what do you think is the issue?
The problem is multi-layered. I'll try to highlight a couple of things.
Yeah.
One is that flocking with one another is human nature. That's kind of basic 101 is we like to be together.
Right.
People, places, everything that we can identify with as humans, we just flock to those things. It's kind of how our brain is made in a really strange way, right? And so for a lot of us to get outside of our own preferences and come-froms, it takes a lot of energy and a lot of awareness in order to do that. So I do think that on a basic human level, that's a good reason why churches are sort of racially segregated. The second thing is that, believe it or not, when people go out to plant churches, start churches, there is actually training that's happening that is encouraging church planters and people who are starting things to do it in a homogeneous way. The reason being is that is the fastest way to grow a church.
Now explain that.
So there is something called the homogeneous church principle, right? Which sort of is in kind of a business model of, say, who is your target demographic, right? So your target demographic may be young, white American people who have moved into a city where there's gentrification happening. Well, if that's your target market, that is who your church will be. And then you will end up being what we're seeing a lot right now in our cities.
Right.
You will be a one race church that has come in and planted in a city that is extremely diverse, particularly of African American people, Hispanic people. And then now you've got a real problem on your hands. And so trying to start a church by saying, how can we get the same kind of person in it is a huge problem. It's from a business standpoint, like I said, fastest, greatest way to grow a church, real fast. Yeah. Doing a multicultural church is the slowest way to grow a church.
And I think that's it. I think people
really
don't want to do that.
And the third thing I'll give you is that, believe it or not, in our colleges, in our trainings, all of our young leaders that are coming out, we are essentially training our young leaders how to only lead to their own kinds of people. We're not actually teaching them how to lead cross-culturally, and usually because we haven't done it well in our country. So there's not a lot of people that know how to teach it and to teach the strategy of it. So, I mean, those are just three pillars, if you will, that are keeping our churches segregated. And honestly, church has become so much more about our preferences. A lot of times more than what has God called us to. Yeah. Because that I believe that our only model of New Testament worship in the Bible is Revelation 7. And in Revelation 7, the vision is of a multilingual, multiracial, multi-ethnic people that are centered around Jesus, centered around the throne, worshiping him together. So if the only model we have is diverse, we need to be very, very real with ourselves why we are not poking the models that we have right now, because it looks nothing like it's supposed to look, given what the Bible has to say.
Well, that's a good segue, because I was going to ask you, like, when we did the Aware conference, the thing that always sticks out to me, then you say this all the time, and I want people to hear it come from you. you saying, it's better that we're diverse. It's just better. And then you said you just have to look and say who's missing.
Yes.
Can you just give me that whole spiel?
Yeah. Well, that's my favorite question, because as soon as you start to ask a question like that, it just makes the brain just expand, right?
Yeah.
So instead of approaching diverse ministry as, well, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
One more thing we have to add to our strategic planning or that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Look at it as, no, given our model of ministry that has been given to us by God,
Mm-hmm.
who now is missing? And when you ask the question, who is missing,
Mm-hmm.
you go way beyond the optics of color or race. Because a diverse church is not about, hey, we need a Chinese man, a Korean lady, a white guy, and a black woman on the team.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
that's optics.
Yeah, right.
And that's basic 101. Now, there is a strategy in that. Let me be clear.
Yeah.
There is a strategy in that. However, once you get down to, okay, here's our team, here's our church, here's our senior leadership structure, and that's in church or organization, wherever you find yourself, to ask the question, great, now who's missing?
Yeah.
That question serves you well in every single season of life, ministry, or business that you find yourself in.
Right.
Because now you start to look outward to say, who makes us better?
Yeah.
Whose insight do we need?
Yeah.
Whose come from do we need?
Yeah.
All of these things
Right.
that weave themselves into culture
Yes.
that makes us better.
I agree with you 200% on that. I just want to shout, and I just want to be like, amen, sister. Amen. I want to ask you that again, and I want to do this one, because there are people that are listening that work in jobs and corporations. And there was something that you said that I thought really impacted me when we did the Aware workshop. You just said, you have to look at your organization and just say who's missing. So can you please tell the listeners about that?
Absolutely. Being able to ask the question, who is missing, will serve your business or your organization in every single season that it finds itself, no matter how things have changed, no matter how
Right.
market conditions have changed, whatever that is. The world is going to be diverse.
Right.
It's going to continue to get even more diverse.
Right.
And so to answer the question, who's missing, now helps you to look at your whole organization, to look at everything that you put out,
Right.
to look at every resource that you start to put out and say, what part of the population are we not serving well,
Right.
or are we missing? So for instance, not only will it help your organization thrive, but honestly, it will also save you a lot of heartache.
Totally.
I mean, we all know, we've seen, ad campaigns and commercials that have come
Yeah.
out, and a segment of the population is like, how come nobody caught that?
Yeah,
right?
it's like the new
Yes.
Gucci ad, with
Yes,
the
yes.
blackface, or if it's
Yeah.
the Dove campaign where they wash
Right.
the skin
Yes.
away.
Yeah.
And my thing is, if there was some diversity in that office,
Absolutely.
it wouldn't have cost you what it cost you, because somebody would have caught that.
Right. And that's why it's always important to ask who's missing.
Right.
Who's missing actually also helps you to think outside of just the structure of your organization.
Right.
So you might say, well, we don't have anybody on our board or our decision-making committees that are, female,
Right.
or, what make up your culture group, right? But it says, okay, well, they're missing. Then how do we get their voice
Right.
included in what it is that we're doing? Because I believe, honestly, Calvin, that most of these faux pas that we see, that they actually didn't have to be that way. It's a blind spot.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe many times that, like, a business like Dove or something like that. I think there was another ad. I can't remember the company, but there was something with a young African-American boy, and he had the sweater on. Had
Right.
something about, like,
Monkey, something.
I'm
yeah.
a free monkey or something.
Yeah, or something like that.
Well, so the thing is I don't believe, I'm choosing to believe that those brands
Yeah.
did not set out in their board meeting and say, how can we
Right.
make this part of the population really angry, and that way they won't even buy any of our stuff.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have a hard time thinking that people brands
Yeah,
as
I
a
don't
brand think that clearly. However, this is the issue when your decision-making group is of one culture, is that there needed to be somebody on those boards to say, hold on, y'all might not know this,
Right.
but in my culture,
Right.
just so you know, this is part of our history.
Yeah.
And, this is how this could be taken.
Yeah.
Now, at least at that point, the company then has a decision to make.
Totally.
Right?
Yep.
And a smart company would take that into consideration and say,
Exactly.
okay, well, thank you for being here. We're so glad you're here. How could this actually be better?
Right.
How could this message that we're trying to bring be just sit better with that audience?
And
it's
it's
just wisdom.
It's wisdom.
Yes.
And there was an article in the New York Times, and it said brands need to diversify or else. So there's been this big call in the New York Times of like, listen, to all the big brands, you have to start being intentional. You have to start hiring more people. And I'm seeing brands right now hire diversity and inclusion officers left and right.
Yes.
From BP Oil to any big company, you name it. They're moving toward that. The NBA just hired a friend of mine's friend to be the diversity inclusion officer for the NBA.
Yeah.
And it just showed, when I see brands and NBA and all these major brands hire people like that, it makes me say, now how come they are getting it? But then when you come to religious organizations like the church, it's like...
Well, let me tell you this, is the way I see it is that at least brands and corporations have a reason. The reason is the bottom line and the future of the business.
Yeah.
You would think that in a religious organization that we would be very connected to our why.
Right.
But I think it shows that all the time we are not connected to the why. I think it was maybe it was Simon Sinek.
Yeah.
Who I think he's great.
He's amazing.
He has this whole talk about being connected to your why. That is so important, whether you are a religious organization or whether you are a brand, to keep poking all the time. Why are we doing what we're doing? Because I will tell you this, from an organizational standpoint, if your why is, hey, we need to make sure that we make some money this quarter, so we need some fill in the blank people, that will always be short-lived.
Right.
What also will be short-lived is if we start to hire diversity coordinators and tell the diversity coordinators, good luck, diversify this company. Because then it becomes the onus of that one person, right,
totally,
to make everything happen. But when we're talking about cultural inclusion this way, it needs to be the vision of the entire organization.
Exactly.
Or it will literally just stop at the diversity office.
Totally.
Right? But you and I can both say that big kudos to organizations and brands for saying, this is a problem and we're about to solve it.
Totally.
And I don't know about you, but from a church standpoint, I'm tired of losing.
Yeah, me too.
I'm tired of being, there's always this joke about being 10 years behind.
Yeah.
Particularly in the music industry.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, the church is always 10 years behind.
Yeah.
But again, we're late.
Yeah.
And we're 10 years behind. And even in the conversation on diversity, that's why, CNN, Fox News, pick your media outlet, is not calling people from the church to say we need help with diversity. Yeah. Because when brands and organizations are more diverse intentionally than we are, we have lost our credibility.
Yeah. And I think, it's hard for me because discrimination is tough. And I think when there's a blank, we tend to fill it in incorrectly. It could be correct, but we shouldn't leave the space blank, as it relates to diversity, because this is what happens. Now, I've never talked about this, but this is the first time I'm going to talk about this. So maybe about a year or so ago, I had applied for a job, and I never said where it was, but I'm going to say it today. I was referred by a vice president to apply at Dave Ramsey.
Oh, yeah.
So it was it's a senior VP kind of recommendation. So I go into the interview and I think I'm doing amazing. Like I'm giving you my best. I do the phone interview. Then I think I'm in like the 4th round, and I go in and meet and talk. So they keep it going for a couple of weeks. Then I finally get a call from the human resource person and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know, to not keep you, leading you on. We decided that, you're amazing in your skills." This is what she said. Your skills are amazing, but they feel at this time that you don't fit our culture.
And that was it.
That was it. Like, and I'm like, what? She's like, and then now, she was an African American but she wasn't the one that I interviewed with. She was just facilitating the process. So you have a senior vice president that in my process, he got promoted to another department. And so he wasn't in the department anymore that I was interviewing for, but it was all his people that work under him.
Yeah.
So it's coming with the strongest recommendation, whatever. And you can say, your skills are amazing. It's not you, the person. It's just, you just don't fit our culture, but you don't give an explanation.
Right. It's almost better if they just say, we don't like you.
Yeah. It would just been better if like, we don't like you, or there was somebody else more qualified.
Right. Yeah.
And it could be for whatever reason, but don't tell me
I don't fit.
I don't fit the culture, because immediately I'm going to fill in the blank.
Yeah.
It's either because I'm black or I'm an overweight black male.
Right.
I just overweight
and
male.
For women, it can be, it's because I'm
yeah,
a female,
exactly.
you don't trust me.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
Now even weight discrimination is becoming a huge thing. Like, you
Yeah.
just can't discriminate from people because of their appearance
Right.
and the outside. And that's why I've had to work so hard to become good at something, because I say this a lot of times. And I'm not dogging Dave Ramsey. And for those listening, I'm just being honest. Right. That's who it was. And I got frustrated this Martin Luther King when I see them posting about Martin Luther King. He was amazing. Diversity or whatever. Everybody's posting about Martin Luther King in January. But then you have 800 employees and, maybe a handful of diversity. Right. It's hard for me. So I felt I was kind of a little upset this year, because I was seeing so many people do that, and brands talk about diversity, where I really would love to see them post pictures of their new hires this year on Martin Luther King Day. And so it's been tough, because I'm not saying that people are deliberately doing this. Sure. I think it's this lady, there's like a moral myopia that she talked about, just blinded,
But think about that. I mean, many people had a big problem with affirmative action, and still,
totally.
I mean, I'm a football fan, right? And I listen to, every year around time hiring NFL coaches, right? We're like, where are all the African American men?
Yeah.
To all these things. So we don't like to talk about it. But, on the one hand, racism is negative, right? Racism is essentially you're keeping people out. You are keeping them from jobs. You're making assumptions about them. You're not letting them buy homes and all of those things because of their race.
Right.
Well, on the other side of that, what we're trying to say with inclusion, intentional inclusion, is when you answer the question, who's missing, it helps you to start to look at your workforce even to say, we need to redefine the qualifications of what, quote unquote, best means. Who's the best candidate? I would venture to say can no longer just be about skill.
Right. I agree.
It can't. It has to be something greater than that. Skill, yes. I mean,
yes,
all of us,
yeah.
Right? You have to be able to do what we're asking you to do. However, there is a part of it, because we're human beings, that we have to consider culture. We have to consider the cultural come from. We do this all the time in corporations with regards to age.
Totally.
Right? People go out and they hire people based on age, based on youth,
Totally.
So in that, we're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to culture and race, we get real weird about that.
Yeah.
And I think particularly if you're people who own lots of businesses and corporations are not always, but a lot of times white American.
Right.
That it makes a lot of them feel very uncomfortable to think, we're a corporation of mostly white Americans. We need to find some Black Americans,
Right.
to come and be a part of our. That makes people, and particularly good-hearted, well-meaning people,
Right.
feel very uncomfortable because it feels like racism.
Yeah.
But it's not keeping someone out.
Yeah, totally.
It's including someone,
Totally.
and that is quite the far cry from racism.
Yeah.
I would call it consideration. And consideration, not quotas,
Yes,
by the way.
that's great.
Consideration is where corporations need to flow. Consideration is where religious organizations need to flow. I see you.
Yeah.
I consider you. Therefore, I'm going to intentionally
Yeah.
include you because you make us better.
Well, at the end of the day, you're so correct about that, because at the end of the day, everyone is looking to be seen, heard, and valued.
Absolutely.
And that's just what I believe. That's why you do have a Black Lives Matter, because
Yes.
people are saying, do you see me? Do you hear me? Does anything I say, does it matter to you? Do I matter?
Yeah.
And people go on the extreme and say, well, they're this and they're that. But no, they're really just saying, yeah, all lives matter, but Black lives matter, Latino lives matter. And you can't just be like, well, you can't deflect to the other culture and say, well, their lives matter too. It's like, no, they're asking you for them.
Yeah.
And all it is a simple yes, or, or if you don't, at least we know where you stand.
Yes.
And that's why I was saying, I think it's been hard because we leave the space blank, and it causes us to fill in the blank incorrectly. And, I want to just kind of, wrap it up in this way. One of the things that I feel like growing up, and you can tell me if you agree, as a Black male, my parents would be like, you got to work hard because you're not going to, the white man is not going to give you anything for free. You got to work hard. You got to be educated. I have to be Calvin that walks into the room. Hey, Calvin, it's nice to meet you. I have to talk a certain way. I can't be like, yo, what's up, dog?
Right.
I can't do that to get a job.
Right.
And so what happens is I wind up giving 200% to a white male's 100%. In the moment that I give 150, it's considered not equal.
Yes.
Like you didn't work hard enough. And sometimes, this is just my theory, I look at our culture, whether it's sports and anything, there's something in us that wants to be so great at something because that's our ticket. And I see it in the sports world where it's like you'll get African Americans that will excel in tennis or golf or basketball because there's this thing in us that's like, I gotta give 200%. Like I gotta be, I can't just be at 100 with another person's 100 because they don't accept me at 100.
Right.
If I do the same thing that the white male does at my age, they're not going to pick me.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate, and, we can go on and on and on, and we can be on a soapbox, and that's not it, because this is not just geared toward white and Black.
Right.
There are Black organizations and churches. You're just as guilty. You can still be intentional about having diversity in your church. It doesn't even mean that you're embracing white and Black and yellow skin tones. It may be the diversity of your sound. It may be the music. We talked about it before at the conference.
Yes.
It could be your playlist that you are playing before service that you just decided to not only do Michael W. Smith, you might add Tasha Cobbs in this Sunday or something Latino or,
something from Nepal.
Or Nepal, just to expose people. Now, you don't
Yes.
have that on your stage,
Right.
but it's just the simple intentionality. And what do you think, because I want to just get to some of the solutions. What are some solutions that people can start incorporating immediately?
Well, there's several things. One thing, and this is the place you need to start, is to remember that you can do it.
Right.
I know that doesn't sound like a traditional strategy, but usually the reason why we end up doing nothing is because we think we have to do everything. Or we look at what's happening and we look at how far we have to go.
Yeah.
And it becomes overwhelming and fearful for us.
Yeah.
And we don't even know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And so then we don't try. And then we just give up. So strategy number one is just believe that you can do it.
Yeah.
Just do something.
Yeah.
Just take one step towards it. So that's the first strategy. The second strategy is look at where your organization is doing really well. So where are the places that you're like, man, we are crushing it here,
Yeah.
right? We're crushing it on, hospitality, or we're crushing it on, our how we deal with customers, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Look at where you're doing well, and then ask the question, how can we infuse diversity into the already existing structures that are going well?
Yeah.
Because that's going to start to help you as an organization or as a church, whatever you are, to see some success immediately, and that will keep you going. So, for instance, if you have really great technical space in your building or in your church or whatever it is, you can start with some playlists.
Yeah.
Right? Like you were saying before, you may not have people to pull off what you're trying to pull off, but really in this day and age,
Right.
there are no hindrances
Right.
to all of us being and expressing diversity
Yes.
in our organizations.
Yeah.
We can find it everywhere. Then hold loosely to your structure. In every season of what you're doing, whether that be in ministry, in every season of business, quarters, poke what you're doing and ask the question, is it possible that we are holding structures that are unintentionally keeping people out? What you might find might surprise you.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're not afraid to ask other people
Yeah.
for their opinion
Yeah.
on how they see what it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? And so once you start to do that, then you can say, can we shift this just a little bit? What do we need to do to either add to this or delete this to make sure that we're not unintentionally keeping people out?
And as you're talking, I'm thinking about another solution that we've talked about before, because I think when people watch this or listen to it, they're going to say, one, these are two black people that are talking about diversity. Of course, black people always say this. And I think there's something that we can talk to other African Americans or other minorities and tell them how we can challenge them to be better with the Caucasian audience, meaning just giving people an on-ramp to be safe. You talked about that before, but can you just kind of explain to the minorities of how to be a better culture coach?
Yes. So oftentimes people ask me what I do, and I say I'm a culture coach. And what that means is I believe that there is what I like to call the majority middle. There's a majority middle of us, and particularly people of African American descent, who, because of our life experiences and our life experience, can be a bridge to other cultures to help them understand.
Right.
And so a lot of times, our narrative has been really from the time I've been little, which is, when people want to understand diversity or they want to understand culture, it's like, just make sure that nobody comes to you and asks you, because it's like, I'm not your teacher. But then the reality is like, do we really want our friends to be reading a book?
Right.
I mean, honestly, if we really think about that, do we want our friends, our non-African American friends in this case, to just read a book about black people and then come to their own ideas about it and then carry on with life? That to me isn't relationship.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the context of the church,
Right.
I believe that all of us enter into what the Bible calls the sufferings of Christ. And I believe that every culture has its burden and its suffering. And I do believe that for those of us who are African American, that this is a suffering of Christ that we choose to enter into because God has asked us to. Once we kind of sign on the dotted line, so to speak, to trust Jesus, to walk with him, we can no longer copy the behaviors and the patterns of this world.
Yeah.
Or our culture, where the narrative says, give everybody else the hand. Don't teach them. Go let them find out for themselves. I'm just offering another option.
Yeah.
To say, what if there's a better way through relationship and through coaching and talking that we can actually move this forward rather than putting up one more roadblock.
Yeah.
Now, I do understand that, in our culture and in other cultures as well, people may not be ready to do that because there might be some pain or some experience or some fear quite possibly that is keeping them from that. But I do believe there is a large majority of us that can be a bridge, can be an on-ramp for our friends and people around us to help them know what they don't know.
Yeah. And, I think you're so right, because I have a lot of non-minority friends, and I have a lot of Black friends, and I have a lot of non-minorities. And they just need to feel safe that they can ask a question, and I'm not ready to pop off and just go off and be like, well, I can't believe you, and just to listen to them and just say, hey, can I ask you this? Yeah. I've just always been curious to know, why do Black people get upset at Trump or whatever it is? Just to feel safe to ask those questions. Right. And I've learned that in talking to you, and then I'd apply it myself. And I get so many victories in listening to them and then showing them a better way or a solution. It's really what I call empathy. It's like Brene Brown says, it's just get into the pit with them. Yes. And then just identify with the space that they are in, and then just lead them out from your experiences.
Yeah, and we have to understand too, when we're having conversation, and we want, particularly in our country, majority white Americans to understand that the burden that many people do carry, I'm just saying this just based on, it's good for us to understand, it's wisdom to understand, is that for a lot of white American Christians, or just for a lot of white Americans, there is no safe place to process. And I think what we're talking about here are people who are trying to say, I don't know.
Right.
And I want to know, will you teach me? In a sense. And when you have people that are in that space, we have to understand that white Americans carry this burden of always being labeled a racist, no matter what they do or who they are. Whereas for us, so in a sense, really, if you think about it this way, we probably have more in common right now than we ever have. Yeah. Because we're in this time in our country where, our culture feels very collective. Lots of non-white American cultures feel very collective. White Americans have been relatively individualistic because they can be, except when it comes to this. And now more than ever, it's like the collective burden shared by white Americans to say, I don't even want to enter the conversation because I'm afraid. I'm going to be called a racist before I even get my question out. I'm afraid that there will be assumptions made about me simply based on the fact that I'm white. That there will be, someone will question my motives, and that someone will literally shut down as soon as I ask something. So if you think about it, all of us now share something very in common. That we have this collective burden. So I believe where wisdom teaches, if there is a behavior or a pattern of the world, do the opposite. Because if we just keep doing what our cultural narratives have told us, and everything that media and the world is telling us, if that's the only thing that we do, literally nothing will change. And we need to shift into creationists instead of copyists. Like, let's create the new reality, the new world that we want. Who knows, maybe this is the generation that made significant progress. I'm sure that the people in the civil rights movement didn't know that they would be the generation, right? Maybe we will be the generation to make significant progress as well.
Totally. Well, I just want to first of all thank you for being a part of this, Nikki, because you're in Nashville visiting, and I know you got a lot going on. And I think what my goal of this conversation was just to start the conversation. And for those that are listening and watching, you're not going to be able to learn everything about diversity, inclusion, being aware. This is just to show up on the topic. Instead of ignoring it, I just wanted to do something that's like, listen, we're taking steps toward it. And what would you say? I have two more things. What would you say to a church? There's pastors, there's worship leaders listening. There are people that are members. There are people that don't know to go to church, but they're saying they're agreeing. This is something that we need to do. what is just something that you can say, like, hey, if you don't learn anything else from this episode, commit to doing what?
The most important thing is to commit to learn. One of the most powerful questions that you can ask anyone is, can you teach me?
Right.
As soon as you go into a posture, really, of can you teach me, it doesn't matter what your cultural come from is at that point. We are then all on common ground.
Right.
Oftentimes, particularly here in the United States, the burden can feel like it is on a lot of our white American brothers and sisters, right? But I would say the one thing there is, again, can you teach me?
Yeah.
Is a really important posture to take. And then for those of us who are in this country that are not majority white American culture, the responsibility is on us as well.
Yeah.
For other cultures to say, can you teach me?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot to learn about the global culture
Totally.
around us who, quite frankly, in the diversity conversation doesn't always have a voice.
Yeah.
Because it's usually the two strongest bookends,
Yeah.
Black people and white people. But there are, so many cultures in between those
Right.
two that need a voice as well, and I think really start to level out the conversation.
Yeah.
So again, just the posture and the question of can you teach me, and always knowing that, Calvin, there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
And half the time, we can't find our keys.
Right.
We can't operate a vehicle or a computer, and so to think like now
Yeah.
we know everything
Yeah.
is crazy. So to stay open, to stay curious, propels us in the right direction.
That's awesome. And I got to ask you this one while we're here. I ask every guest.
Okay.
What's one area that you're showing up on this year that you're just like, you know what? I'm showing up on this.
I love it. I am showing up by trusting my own gut. And I say that because even being in some of the environments that I've been in the last 15, 20 years, I'm not always sure they do a good job of telling people to trust their own gut. It's quite the opposite. It's if you feel something or you think something, chances are you're probably wrong, or it's probably evil, or it's probably deceiving you. But for me, it's no, I know that God speaks to me, Spirit speaks to me at all times and speaks to me through my gut. So trusting my intuition, trusting my humanness to get into conversations on diversity and make good decisions. That's where I'm showing up.
That's awesome. I feel you on that one. I'm going with my gut too this year. So where can people get in touch with you? How can they follow you? Where all that?
Well, I'm on social media like everybody else, so you can find me there. Best way to see what I do and to get in touch is NikkiLerner.com, NIKKILERNER.com. And if you're going to shoot me an email, it's info@NikkiLerner.com. But then you can find me all over the place like everybody else. Yeah,
she's on. And make sure you follow her. And guys, for those that are listening and watching, if you need a culture coach in your church and you just like, man, I need someone that's safe. I need someone that allows me to ask questions. Nikki, I think, is like the Oprah Winfrey of diversity. No, seriously. I think she is, because she gives an on-ramp for people very easy. She has the language, the terminology. And I'm just being honest. She's one of the people that I glean a lot of wisdom from around this area, because it is communicating, because communication is defined as the process of shared meaning. So if we both don't share the meaning, it's miscommunication. So if you're needing someone to help you share the meaning, help you to communicate, I think Nikki is one of the best ones that you can just tell. And if you're listening, watching, you can just kind of tell there's something different about her. It is something different about her, and it's the spirit that she carries. And I take a lot of pride, and I trust my gut that when I see potential, I know that this is Oprah Winfrey. Like, I don't look at her as just Nikki Lerner, this singer and worship leader, or just a culture coach. She's a communicator, and she brings hope to people, and she makes people feel safe. So I hope all you listening, get her on your podcast, get her on your shows, get her at your church. And not to mention she talks, but she can sing. That's the other thing. She's yes, she can sing very well, and she's very talented, and she has a band, and she travels, does jazz music. She does all this cool stuff. Before I go, I was listening to some of the episode that you did at Belmont University. You spoke yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was watching some of the video back that one of our team members filmed, and you were doing this. You had them singing.
Yeah.
What was that? And what were you doing?
It's a song off of one of my records that I use particularly in student settings to just, before I try to tell them anything, to try to make sure that we have communication and engage together.
You got it. You had Nikki had all these different people. Fun. They were singing and harmonizing, and I was like,
they were clapping after a while. They were moving and clapping.
I love that. That was really, really great.
Thanks.
And so anyway, well, thank you for being here, and this won't be the last time, and we'll see you guys next time.
All right, see y'all. Thanks.